Hello, everyone, and a very good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. First of all, thank you for joining in, and I hope everyone is well settled now. So, this will be an 1 hour session where we will be talking about the ransomware simulation, beat cyber attacks with trusted backups. So we'll be having a look at what all feature functionalities has to be provide on this particular topic, how effective is ransomware in the market, what is the overall scenario, how does it look like, and how you can create an ultra resilient kind of an infrastructure for yourself. So myself, Pooja Vijay Kugnore, I am the senior inside system engineer. I have been associated with Veeam from past 3 years, and I look after the entire SAARC assembly business for Veeam. Now, as you are already aware, so all attendees are on listen only mode. So if you have got any questions or queries, please post them into the questions panel and we will take them up at the end of today's session. Okay. So let's begin. Uh, yes, ransomware is a disaster. You might believe it or might not believe it, but it is a kind of or a sort of a disaster. Usually, the disaster recovery conversations are often difficult to have with the customer. So, there might be a particular mindset that one person might have, or there might be a particular approach in which they might be dealing with the ransomware. But as you are aware, the ransomware is evolving really fast. And then to upgrade yourself, to upgrade your infrastructure accordingly, have that kind of barriers put across in your data centers or your workloads is really, really important. So we'll be having a look at that particular point over here. Now, talking about ransomware, yes, there is definitely not a particular way in which the ransomware starts affecting your environment. But then, if I have to say, if there was a particular way, maybe a malicious link or a malicious mail landed to your inbox. It remained undetected, it penetrated your infrastructure, maybe via some XYZ source. It just came into your system. Maybe it went to the staging area, it started infecting or it started scanning those critical workloads or started picking out particular kind of files, so particular kind of a workload in your setup, and it started infecting those. And then it started the encryption process, and then after that, that is where the data becomes, I would say, in an unreadable format, and then that is where the extortion starts. This can be one approach in which the ransomware attack works. There can be also attacks where immediately the ransomware hits the infrastructure and then boom, every data is all encrypted just at that moment. While some other ransomware attacks go slow, go step by step, go workload by workload, such that they can remain undetected for a longer period of time. So that is where I would say there is no predefined way in which a ransomware can hit your environment, but then definitely you can build an infrastructure which proactively informs or lets you know if your backed up data is getting hampered or your if in just case of this kind of a disaster if you are able to perform the recovery or not. So yes, so continuing with the ransomware topic, uh, what as per we had run in 2022 we did have a Veeam ransomware threat report and also the data protection report that we had run across our the customers, and then we could feel across the industry 85% of the customers have admitted of experienced at least one ransomware attack in the past year. So that is where the ransomware is now going and affecting more and more number of customers. And the funny part, or I would say, even if the 1/3 of the companies who were affected and who paid the ransom still didn't get their data back even after paying the ransom attack. So that is where this is where I would say Even if the customers have paid the ransom amount, they were still unable to retrieve their data. This is a kind of a scary situation to be in. Then we do have the good part also, where there is 19% of the people who were affected by the ransomware attack, but they were able to recover their data. So that is where we are aiming via this webinar, or via this approach. We are planning to be in this particular percentage of people, or this particular green zone. So there are multiple features in Veeam via which you can basically go and get into this green zone. So we'll be discussing them step by step as we proceed ahead. Okay. Now, why is ransomware so effective? Yes, we saw how the ransomware penetrates your infrastructure, how the industry is getting affected overall by the ransomware attack. So, as I said, with all those defenses in place, why is ransomware so successful? The obvious answer is malware is being created and is evolved faster than it can be detected. Anti-malware providers see up to 1 million new pieces of malware per day. So even if it were possible to continuously catch 99% of these particular attacks, still they are missing 10,000 threats each day. Now, the other issue is many companies don't look at security comprehensively. They are forced to build a loophole or maybe hole in their defense to meet a certain business requirement, or their networks are so complex, or maybe there is some setup where there might be some open end. Based on the last 10 years of attacks, there are 7 top reasons why the ransomware attacks have been so successful. So as you can see them on the screen, so maybe the untested backups. So you're taking the backups for your workloads, but you're doing the SAARC check also, but there is no proper step that basically turns on your virtual machine, or once the backups have happened, these backup files are turned out or are spinned up in the isolated environment and then gives out the report. There is no such kind of testing. So untested backup can also be a problem, where that is where the ransomware is so effective. So customers who don't follow best practices will find that their data isn't accessible whenever it is needed. The lack of testing also makes the restoration slow for the companies, and finally they go ahead and pay the ransom in hopes of getting their data back. The second may be the misconfiguration. The routers or security devices that you've procured are there in your infrastructure, are there with the default configurations and default passwords. Definitely really easy to crack and enter your infrastructure. Inconsistent policy. So maybe you're moving your workloads from to cloud. You were having a certain security policies that you were using on premise, and then maybe you're planning to use the same security plans that you used on premise to cloud. So this might be leading to pure security choices. So this is where, in case of what worked for you on the data center policies, if you apply the same to the cloud, may or may not work. Lack of segmentation. The flat networks are easy to manage but allow the malwares to spread really easily. Some networks are so complex that true segmentation is impossible, but all or nothing approach is putting companies at risk. So this is where I would say one of the approach why the ransomware attack is effective. Maybe poor password policy, as we are all aware, and the common passwords. Even if you have the passwords file is created and it is being stored on the desktop for easy access per se, I would say not a good approach to go ahead. Maybe the passwords aren't changed regularly. Lack of two-factor authentication, yes, definitely one of the greatest reason why the poor password policy and the ransomware being effective comes to play. Alert fatigue, yes, maybe you missed out certain alert, or you missed out some particular patch that needs to be upgraded. That can also be one of the reasons. So, seeing how the ransomware has been so effective, and it would be wrong to say, or there is no surprise when I read out the next statement, as you are able to see on the screen. Let's face the fact, if you cannot recover your data, nothing else matters. So that is where the Veeam's approach to deal with ransomware comes into picture. Secure your backed up data. Have that kind of a protection for your backed up data as we proceed ahead. Now, Veeam's approach towards ransomware has been in a multi-layered approach. So that is where we just don't depend on a particular way or a particular, we go ahead with a hyper resilient kind of an infrastructure or a hyper resilient kind of a way to deal with the ransomware. So that is where we are talking about. So we will be talking about these particular pointers, 5 pointers, as you can see on the screen. We'll be talking about them in a bit more depth. So total control over your recoveries. Yes, we will be talking about how fast you can perform the recoveries just in case of a disaster. Multi-layered immutability. Even when your data is at rest, it is saved on the repository, how you can save them from any sort of ransomware attack. Multi-layered, yes, we'll be talking about immutability on premise and cloud from that perspective. Data mobility, yes, we'll be talking about how easy it is to move your data when we talk about the backups perspective or the restoration perspective using Veeam. The monitoring part definitely comes into picture and adds on advantage in proactive alerts and generating reports, automatic generation of the reports just in case of these disasters. In simplicity through automation, yes, this is basically our Veeam recovery orchestrator, which helps you with just one single click. It helps you to switch on to your TR location and has automated testings and reports that can be pulled out from this particular tool. Okay, so starting with the first pointer, take total control over your recovery. Yes, this has a really, really good impact when it comes to the ransomware attack. Now, if you are like most of the companies who have hundreds of applications and terabytes of structured and unstructured data that has different SLA, a ransomware incident can get really messy and really can get fast, and being locked into only a single or a proprietary recovery process might not be enough. So, as I said, the ransomware attack can infect the entire VM or just a particular folder or just maybe a particular path or just the database. So, just having one or two ways in which you can recover your data might not be sufficient. So, unlike other vendors in the market who have predominantly one or three ways in which you can perform the recoveries, this can be a good to go approach, usually, which has maybe two to three kind of a 2 to 3% of your infrastructure is affected with the recovery. But imagine that you have these, as we discussed, hundreds of applications and terabytes of data, and the entire workload is affected or is encrypted. The entire production is 100% encrypted by the ransomware attack. Then you need to have the restorations, which helps you to have a very low RTO and help you with multiple ways in which you can perform the recoveries. That is where Veeam comes into picture. So that is where you have heard about Veeam instant recovery. So Veeam has pioneered the instant VM recovery 13 years ago. So if you have already used Veeam or you're already have some glimpse about Veeam, so instant VM recovery to the VMware platform was already available earlier, but now you can perform cross-platform instant VM recoveries. Be it any image level backup that you have taken from the Veeam console, you can perform instant VM recoveries to either VMware Hyper-V or Nutanix platform in less than 5 to 15 minutes. So that is where you can bring down the RTO to less than 5 minutes and have the data up and running, so at least the users can get connected. This is where the instant VM recoveries, so be it a cloud instance or a physical server or any other virtual machine backup that you have taken, you can retrieve or recover the data as fast as or as less as 5 minutes. Recovering from the storage snapshots, yes, we do have very tight integration when it comes to the storage part also. Along with the storage snapshots, you basically can recover the data a bit more faster. So talking about this, I had a very good health care company. So this is where It is based out of North US and it identified a ransomware attack which impacted nearly 1,700 virtual machines and over 600 TB of data. Now, with Veeam, they were not only able to recover their data from the backup, but they were able to use the immutable storage snapshot, which helped them being faster restoration. So being 4x faster restoration. So that is where you can also recover from the storage snapshots and also you can recover from the replicas. If you're aware about Veeam backup and replication, this tool not only helps you to take the backup of your workload, but also helps you to replicate your virtual machines from DC to DR locations. You can also recover from your replicas. So that is where this particular option taking control over the recovery. Just to give you a glimpse, Veeam backup and replication itself provides you 91 unique ways in which you can perform the recoveries of your workload. If I talk about Veeam backup for M365, which is a tool that helps you to take the backup of your M365 workloads, there are 45 plus unique ways in which you can perform the recoveries of your workload, granular or even entire machine level, etc. So talking about the next pointer, multi-layered immutability. Yes, most of the companies struggle to protect all their data. They feel that they have to make some trade-off between the security and performance to meet their business needs. These trade-offs are driven by the hardware they are forced to use, which limits how much data can be immutable and how fast the recovery can happen. So we don't bind you to go ahead with that kind of approach. If you're aware about Veeam, Veeam is a completely hardware agnostic tool. So even if you like deployment per se, even if I talk about if I keep the immutability aside for a few moments, deployment of Veeam tool is also again hardware agnostic. So even if you want to deploy my software on a virtual machine or on a physical server, we are absolutely fine with it. We won't bind you to go ahead with a particular hardware or a particular make and model or a particular kind of an appliance. Similarly, when we talk about the backup storage, where you store your backed up data, multi-layered immutability is what we'll be talking about now. Now you can basically take any Linux storage. Uh, you can basically have maybe a server, have the Linux repository, enable the XFS file system on top of it, and in the Veeam console, create a hardened Linux repository. Now add it and create the immutability period for it. So that is where the first copy of the backed up data, you can make it immutable. So just in case if there is some ransomware attack and maybe the production has got affected and via the network it tries to reach to this particular repository, because of the immutability cap, the ransomware attack won't be able to modify or delete or affect your backed up data, and your backed up data remains 100% safe and you can perform the restorations 100%. Similarly, as we also say, have follow 3 to 1 best practice rules. A secondary copy of the backed up data, you want to push it out to cloud. Yes, we are already ready. You can have enable the object log and we have tight integrations with the cloud service providers. You can now make the backups immutable. Even the secondary copy of the backed up data can be immutable. We did had a multi-layered immutability earlier, but it was confined to only the AWS S3 bucket. But now any S3 compatible object storage, we are okay to go ahead and integrate object log you can have, and then you can push out the backed up data. Maybe you say you do not want to go ahead with cloud, you have a DR location where you want to push out a secondary copy of your backed up data, maybe D2D. You don't want to go ahead with a D2D2C kind of an approach. Absolutely fine. You can have a hardened Linux repository in the DR location and have both the copies immutable. So imagine if the primary location is down, there was a natural calamity, a natural disaster due to which the primary storage you are not able to use. And at the same time, it was also hit by ransomware attack, which is a very rare situation, but then yes, can be an approach or can be a situation. You still have a secondary copy of your backed up data, which is securely stored in the immutable repository, and you can perform the recovery from that copy of your backed up data. So direct to object storage was introduced as a part of V12, where maybe you do not want to invest in on-premise repository. You have a remote location where you do not want to invest in any kind of the hardware on-premise. So you can definitely go push out your backed up data directly to the object storage and have immutability enabled over there. So that is where the multi-layered immutability comes into picture. So you can have multiple layers in which you're storing multiple copies of the backed up data you're storing and having immutability at any period. So you do not have to trade off even if your backup infrastructure plan is changing or your business needs are like moving or moving ahead with maybe in cloud plus on-premise kind of an infrastructure, you can have your backed up data secured everywhere. Simplicity through automation, yes, I would say this is where the Veeam recovery orchestrator comes into picture. And if you're aware about this particular tool, I don't know if the name has been changed for this particular tool, and you will find that this particular approach is kind of a really good proactive kind of an approach where you get the recovery verifications and it has automated testing inbuilt. So just in case if you're wondering what this particular tool is all about, it basically gives you uh, freedom from the entire manual processing of doing a DR readiness checks, or it doesn't have you limited to the recovery testings that needs to be performed manually, or the licenses etc that needs to be managed on both the sides. So that is where the Veeam recovery orchestrator helps you over here. There are inbuilt tests. There are four kinds of inbuilt tests and recovery tests that you can basically utilize in this particular tool, and you can schedule them. So maybe there is some a requirement that the DR test or DR drill test should be done every week or maybe every day. You can define it as per the schedule that you require, and it dynamically performs that particular test and what all features or what all things you want to be tested as a part of that particular process. It does that all and it provides you the documentation. Now these documentations are up to date. That is where it may be there is this particular report that you're running. It basically checks if the licenses are active or not, if the network is uh, fine or not, just in case of a disaster, what would be the particular SLA that you will be able to achieve. You might have certain SLAs for certain applications or certain group applications. So if that can be achieved or not as per the requirement of the organization for the critical workloads. So all those things get captured in these particular documentations, and then it also runs these failover plans and then it captures those RPO RTOs, and definitely it helps you to go ahead and present these particular reports with ease to the audit team or to your management team, and you can safely go ahead and say that yes, you are ready for any such sort of disasters. Talking about the mobility part, of course, this is one of my favorite topics when it comes to the mobility. We are all aware that the IT industry is changing really fast. So that is where now we have started moving some of the workloads to cloud. And you might want to have that kind of flexibility even on the backup infrastructure side. So that is where Veeam comes into picture again with the same console. Whatever backups that you have taken using Veeam console, be it virtual machines, physical servers, or any cloud instance backup that you have taken, you can basically have them restored anywhere. So, be it you have taken a backup of on-premise workload, you want to restore it to Amazon EC2, you want to restore it to Azure, you want to restore it to Google, you can perform it. So that is where direct restorations to the cloud can happen, and the backend conversion from maybe V2C or maybe P2C, it happens parallelly when you perform the recoveries. Or take a second use case scenario when you are taking the backup of your cloud instances and want to restore it on premise or maybe VMware Hyper-V or Nutanix, that can absolutely be done using Veeam. And why we are able to perform this is basically we have the backups that we take, be it for an on-premise workload infrastructure or be it cloud instances that you backup, maybe using Veeam backup for AWS or Veeam backup for Azure or even Veeam backup for GCP. We utilize the same algorithm and the same data format or backed up data file format .vbk and VIBs, which can be read across and can be restored either on-premise or either on cloud. Some of my customers also utilize this data mobility part from, I would say, the migration per se. So maybe you are utilizing on-premise infrastructure, the management decided, let's move to cloud. No worries, you can utilize Veeam console, you can take the backup of your workloads and migrate your instances to cloud. So that can be one of the approach. Or maybe you're utilizing physical servers and the management decided let's migrate to a virtual platform, say VMware or say Hyper-V or say Nutanix CHV. So you can perform instant VM recovery and restore it to the virtual platform. So that is where this is the powerful statement about restore anywhere comes into picture from as said from data center to cloud or from one cloud to another cloud or from cloud to on-premise. So imagine if I had taken a backup of your AWS EC2 instance and want to restore it to Azure instance, sure, why not? You can go ahead and do that using Veeam. So that is where you get the complete flexibility just in case in future your management plans to change the current IT infrastructure, want to move from a certain workload or the certain platform to a certain platform, you can go ahead and do it seamlessly. And again, the recovery times are really, really good because it all can be handled from the single console. And just in case if you're restoring it to the virtual machines, the virtual platform, you're already aware about instant VM recovery, which helps you to bring down the RTO to less than minutes, which can help you to get the, I would say, get back to the production faster. So that is where the VM or the mobility part comes into picture. Monitoring part, yes, I would say this particular tool or Veeam one comes into picture over here. Veeam one is a really, really powerful tool when it comes to monitoring your production virtual setup and your backup infrastructure setup. So it has this particular approach where it has an intelligent active analytics in the backend, which helps you in proactive alerting and basically your threat detection. Now, when I say about proactive alerting, there are several kinds of alerts that you can set in the Veeam tool. So it might happen that you have set an alarm for immediate or abrupt hike in the CPU utilization or abrupt change in the incremental size of the backed up data. Can be multiple kinds of alerts that you can basically set in because anywhere there is a ransomware attack that is happening, it might happen that the CPU immediately spikes up or the files have started being encrypted in the backend. So that is where the backed up incremental file size will increase as per the normal cycle. So that can be one of the alert. There are multiple other alerts also that you can basically mark onto that in the tool, and it has a real-time visibility in your infrastructure. So be it your virtual infrastructure that you've integrated in the Veeam console. So imagine you have integrated your VMware instance or VMware host or setup. So it will check if the host is in healthy state or not, or if there is something, maybe there is some warning or there is some error that is there on the host or maybe the virtual machine level, that also will be indicated. And it has this links, even if that is, I would say, there is an error or a warning, it will give you a link of why this error might occur, what are the main causes of this error, and how this error can be resolved. Along with it has that intelligent analytics in the backend that helps you to resolve these errors at your end before waiting to open a support ticket with the virtual platform and then so. Also, it gives you a step-by-step process how you can eliminate that particular error. Also, talking about the virtual platform level, maybe there is an oversized VM or undersized VM, or there is a virtual machine that has been created, that was created maybe for a test and development purpose, and what's left on and unattended for several XYZ number of period. So these kinds of virtual machines can also be one of the landing zones where the ransomware might hit your infrastructure. So this report, you can just run these kinds of reports, and then uh, you can gain that kind of a visibility and improve your production and your backup environment. So that is where this Veeam one comes into picture. We can have definitely the Veeam one session itself is all about 30, 35, 40 minutes session. Lot to cover about that particular amazing tool, but we will just cover this much in this particular session. Talking about the approaches now, we saw bits and pieces of how or what Veeam has to offer. Now we are saying that what you should basically do. Some of the approaches where you can go ahead and have that ultra resilient kind of an approach. So definitely go ahead with 32110 best practice rules, where you have 3 copies of your data. That is your production, your first copy of your backed up data, and secondary copy of your backed up data. All the 2 copies of this backed up data, it is recommended to have in 2 different media types. So maybe first is on block based storage. Secondary, you can have it on an object storage or the tape. Out of these two, keep one offsite, plus it should be immutable and air gapped. This copy, or both the copies can be immutable. It would be really, really good. And then have the recovery verification in place. So there are 0 errors when the backups have happened, and then they can be restored 100% just in case of a disaster. So always follow this kind of a rule when you go ahead and set up your backup infrastructure, or you are planning to improve your backup infrastructure. Backups are always last line of defense. There are sure backup, sure replica kind of a feature functionality that Veeam has to offer. So what these are all about are, so maybe you are talking about a sure backup or a sure replica. Yes, this is that particular option where it gives you the recovery verification. And what this process is all about in the backend, let me tell you that. So you are running a normal backup job schedule. The backups have happened successfully for the workloads, the production workloads, and have landed to the backup repository. Now, the Shore backup job, what it will go ahead and do is it will pull out this backup file. It will spin it up in the isolated environment. You'll have to create an isolated environment in the Veeam console. And this isolated environment, it will check if the virtual machine was spinned up correctly or not, if the operating system spinned up or is working absolutely fine or not, or if the applications or the workloads are running fine or not. It will do all those tick mark activities, and it will give out a report saying the backups were successful, so and so tests have been completed and can be recovered just in case of a disaster. So that is where it kind of gives you the recovery verification. Apart from that, that was about the Shore backup, and Shore replica against runs. Shore replica is running on a similar concept. Talking about the secure backup, it is checked for if there is some malware, and then you can define what action should be taken just in case there is a ransomware attack onto this. Should it be aborted, or the restoration should happen, but the VM should not be connected to the network? You can basically define that over here. So go ahead with the three-part approach. Go ahead with the immutable backups. Have your backed up data stored onto your immutable repositories, be it on-premise using hardened Linux repository, or even if you're pushing it out to cloud, do enable the object log so that you are 100% safe from the attacks. And then have the Veeam tool, have those alerts enabled on your infrastructure, have the data or integration for your virtual platform and the backup infrastructure done onto the Veeam, and have that intelligent monitoring and notifications enabled so that if there is something that is detected, it is sent out to you immediately on the defined email IDs. Testing and verification for rapid and recoverable recoveries. Yes, this is what we talked about from a Sure Backup, Sure Replica perspective. Again, one of the approaches that we just discussed about, if I have to put that in an architecture part, this is how it would look like. So you have your production data, it is being backed up, it is landing to the hardened Linux repository. You can define a policy. Maybe there is something called a scale out backup repository in Veeam, which helps you to have the data movement or the data mobility of your backed up data as per the tiers that you have defined. Maybe you want to go ahead with the D2, D2C kind of an approach. That is where the first landing zone would be your performance tier. Performance tier is nothing but where your backed up data first lands. So this is a block-based storage, can be DAS, SAN, NAS, a deduplicating appliance also. A secondary copy, you want to follow 3-to-1 rule. Secondary copy of a backed up data you're pushing out to cloud. You can have that defined in the scale out backup repository as a part of capacity tier, where a secondary copy will be pushed out automatically as per the period that you have defined in the Veeam console. So it can be any S3 compatible object storages, as you can see on the screen. And it is kind of very transparent setting this up, scale out backup repository. And if you have a longer term retentions, you can also push out these backups to the cold tiers of the cloud, that is your archive tier. You can add your cold tiers of the cloud to the scale of backup repositories, where maybe your longer term retentions, weekly, monthly, and yearly copies, you want to push it out to Glacier or Azure archive tier. You can also go ahead and do that. So that is where you can see you can have the object lock enabled, or you can have the hardened Linux repository. That is where everywhere the data is immutable. If you want to have the list of all the Veeam ready repositories or Veeam ready object repositories, uh, there is a link that we have, and the link actually keeps on upgrading itself. So you can have multiple storages that have already been tested for the repository, or so you can get a glimpse of it from there also. Talking about detecting of an issue, yes, go ahead with the Veeam setup, go ahead with a protection for all your workloads. Ensure that the backups have been scheduled for every workload in your infrastructure, and this also can be checked out. So imagine if you have thousands and two thousands of virtual machines, manually going ahead and checking out in each and every virtual machine if it is protected or not. That can be a very, I would say, not kind of a practical approach to go ahead with. So you can, in Veeam, you can also pull out protected virtual machines or protected machines report. It will show in your infrastructure how many of them have been backed up or are being regularly backed up. When was the last backup that happened for those particular workloads? And in your infrastructure, how many of the workloads have not been backed up? So that is where you can go ahead and have that kind of a report also pulled out. By the way, Veeam has 150 plus kinds of reports when it comes to these kinds of uh, maybe the protection job reports, or maybe the oversized, undersized VM active snapshot reports. Even the active snapshots that are there in your virtual machine start consuming the resources, and you do not want to be in that container situation where your resources are getting wasted. Also, you can utilize those kinds of reports also. Talking about detecting of ransomware, alarms that you can define in the uh, maybe machines. You can check out for unprotected virtual machines. You can check out for the size of the incremental backups alarm kind of a report. You can check out for the CPU RAM resources hike kind of a report that can be basically put in as a part of the alarm in the Veeam tool, Veeam 1 tool. Please do segregate the duties. Now, talking about setting up of the backup infrastructures, we did talk about some of the approaches that you can go ahead with. Now, talking about the infrastructure setup, please go ahead and have that dedicated, or I would say just that it comes to the picture. So talking about maybe you have a backup infrastructure, have the limited access to the VBR console, have the limited access to the repository, have the limited access to the entire backup infrastructure. I have different rules for it. You have maybe there is a new feature in Veeam for this. You can basically go ahead and enable multi-factor authentication also on the Veeam console that we'll be discussing as we proceed ahead. Have those defined workloads or defined administrator itself. Do not give the access to the entire user group or so. Also go ahead with the encryption along with the immutability, along with the protected infrastructure, having the alerts using Veeam 1 in place. There is an option to encrypt your backed up data. So enable that whenever you are creating a backup job. So whenever you are creating a backup job using Veeam console, please enable the AES to 56-bit encryption. So that will basically make it hard for the hackers. So as I said, go ahead with an ultra resilient approach. So there is no direct, so that even if the ransomware attack or the hackers have managed to penetrate your infrastructure, it is difficult for them to go ahead and reach till the repository or affect your files. So do enable your encryption in the Veeam console at the job level. So that is where it will be basically for the source at the fly, and at the rest your data will be protected, and it will be making the ransomware attack or the hackers a bit more difficult till the time it can get detected immediately in your infrastructure. So have that. Also save your passwords securely. Have strong encryption passwords. Please remember your encryption passwords just in case of a disaster you will need them. So have them secured and handled, passwords handled correctly. Talking about the multi-factor authentication, so imagine now there is an access given, maybe a limited access given to the backup infrastructure. But even on top of that, it is always recommended that trust no one. Have the multi-factor authentications enabled. Only the person who will be having the key will be able to go ahead and log into the Veeam console. So imagine the backup server can be accessed by the admins, but only one person, the backup admin, has to accept or has to have the access to the backup server. You can have the multi-factor authentication, and then that particular person would get the key, and then you will be able to log into the Veeam console. So that is where again you are creating a ultra resilient kind of an approach. Lock down the server access. There is again in V12 along with the multi-factor authentication. There is a feature for auto log off. Enable that. So that is where just in case if I have maybe I'm the backup admin, I logged in using multi-factor authentication, but somewhere I engaged in some different work. Maybe there was some other critical work that came to picture, and maybe I forget to just log out of the console. So can auto log off feature also can be enabled, as after so and so many minutes the console should be automatically logged off. So also segregate these particular duties who all should have the access to the backup infrastructure, create the complete visibility utilizing the Veeam tool, have multiple copies of your backed up data, follow 3-2-1 best practice rules, uh, have a hardened Linux repository in place, have a protection for your on-premise cloud instances, all from a single console. If a secondary copy or a direct backup to cloud if you're doing, please enable object lock feature and utilize the hardened Linux repository. So this can be one of the approach to go ahead with. Now, don't go by what I'm saying. Maybe it might sound a bit, I would say, pushy, but then um, I would say that most of the companies that uh, we basically saw this particular IDC business value report. So this is where don't go it from me. A recent IDC study showed that Veeam customers see a 5x reduction in their restoration times after implementing Veeam. That means you can recover your data faster and have less downtime. So if you want to go ahead and have a look at this particular report, you can basically log into the Veeam console. This particular PPT will be sent out post this webinar is done, and you can log in and have a look at this particular report where what customers have said about it. You will be able to have a greater look at it. There is an entire infrastructure when we in Veeam, which involves people, which involves the processes. So we have a dedicated SWAT team, dedicated ransomware support team to help you out just in case of any such situation occurs. So that is where the SWAT team predominantly looks at the setup that you have done, the console and the backed up data. It tries to help you and retrieve your data. There is also something called as uh, ransomware warranty protection that we have launched along with the V12 version. So our V12 version launched on 14th Feb 2023. Please reach out to your local sales team and understand what this warranty about ransomware protection is all about. So that is where Veeam team involves or gets involved and builds an end-to-end backup infrastructure for you, which helps you protection against ransomware and helps you with the warranty. So just in case if there is an attack and if you lose the data, that is where the warranty protection like comes into picture. Um, Also talking about, we have some partners, accredited partners and partner ecosystem, which can be a first landing zone just in case of any such disaster occurs. But then definitely we have multiple people, multiple team involved just in case if you're stuck up in any such kind of situation. So as I said, backup is easy. Any vendor can do it in the market. Any vendor can ask you to go ahead with that particular XYZ approach and perform the backups, but recovery is hard. There is no predefined way in which your infrastructure can be affected. And just having a particular defined one or two approaches may or may not solve the issue. And that is where, when we talk about the recovery, Veeam is best at it. So as we discussed a few moments back, Veeam backup and replication has amazing 91 ways in which you can perform the recoveries. Talk about instant VM recovery, talk about instant database level recoveries. So imagine the ransomware attack has hit the virtual machine, underlying operating system, or the physical server is running absolutely fine. Just the database got corrupted. You can perform instant database level recoveries within less than 5 to 15 minutes. Again, talking about a really good RTO, or maybe you want to publish this database to some other server, or accidentally the table got deleted. Maybe there can be a situation. So you can go ahead and perform a table level restoration. If you're taking the backups of your NAS, you can perform instant SMB share level restore. You can publish the NAS and if it shares as an SMB share, have the accessibility there as soon as possible. Bring up your production as soon as possible. Perform granular restorations of your workloads using Veeam Explorers. There can be multiple ways in which this can be done. Defining to the workloads, maybe Active Directory or SQL or maybe SharePoint or Oracles or so and so. And then again, from a replication perspective, you can restore from replica, VM, secure restore we discussed a few moments back. So these can be explored as per the interests or as per the use case scenario that you are in. So we definitely utilizing these kinds of approaches, and with this simple console and the simple setup, we makes the recovery easy. So talking about, not just talking about the Veeam backup and replications, but along with Veeam One and Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, where you can just with single click you can perform the recoveries. That is where Veeam has to offer it as an entire bundle. It's just a glimpse about, I think we are right on time. Yes, Just to give you a glimpse about what V12 has come up with, we discussed about some of them in our session today. But then now the configuration database can be on Postgres. You can now take the backup of all the devices which are running on IPv6. You can have the multi-factor authentications for the console. You can have auto log off from a security perspective. Now we have controls, and you can have these particular kind of setups. The auto log off, yes, we discussed about it. Direct backups to the object storage, improved backed up data, improved format, helping you to have more backup infrastructure or more optimization when it comes to the backup repositories perspective. Immutability on GFS policies also. If you have a longer term retentions also, you can have the immutability expanded or extended to them also. Or talking about the CDP, yes, CDP helps you to go ahead and replicate your both VMware virtual machines as well as every 5 seconds. So you can bring down your RPO to less than 5 seconds. Now you can have the Linux proxies for the CDPs. Earlier it used to be just Windows. As I said, NAS also now you can push out the backups directly to the cloud. You can have the SMB instant VM recovery, and then you can publish the NFS shares as an SMB shares. Now it supports immutability, and then there were several enhancements at an agent level backups also for your physical servers or your virtual machines. We follow an agent based approach. For AIX Solaris, we now can perform a bare metal restores. We can take an image level backup of them, and then there were enhancements even on the tape side. So, and also at an application plugins level. So we did have enterprise plugins for your for your, I would say so, and then you now have it for MS SQL also. So be it SAP HANA or your Oracle, or uh, be it your SAP on Oracle or your MS SQL, you can have these enterprise plugins and have the database level backups also enabled. So with Veeam, you can have the total control of your recovery. Just to summarize, have a multi-layered immutability, have the complete data mobility, be it talking about it from a backup perspective or from a restoration perspective, have the complete visibility, monitoring, reporting, and intelligent analytics in place with the monitoring tool, and have the automation in place from uh, the testing purpose, automatic testing purpose, and one-click restoration or one-click disaster recovery utilizing the Veeam Recovery Orchestrator tool perspective. Some extra tools if you're interested in having a bit more digging around this particular topic, you can just go to this particular white paper. So you will get some more glimpse about what are or how you can build a particular kind of an infrastructure in your setup, and how Veeam can help over there. And then also, if you're interested in the latest topics when we talk about the cybersecurity space, you can just log into this community, and there will be multiple updates that are coming up with our experts, and you can basically go ahead and have a look at these devices. Also, if you want to follow some best practice guides from our amazing senior essays, which keep on updating this particular website, you can also log into veeambp.com and have this checked up. So if you're setting up a new repository, or if you're setting up a new proxy, what should be the setup, how you can set up the hardened Linux repositories, etc., 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 etc. Else you have the help center document in place, or else you can also reach out to the Veeam team also when it comes to it. We are coming up with our Veeam session in Miami from May 2020, May 12 and 224, and then kindly register yourself, and there will be multiple sessions which will be covering several different topic maybe from a ransomware perspective, or V12 feature functionality deep dive perspective, or Veeam backup for M365 version 7, or Veeam backup for AWS version 6 that was launched a few moments back or few days back. That there are multiple sessions covering these particular topics with 50 plus top speakers, and there'll be many attendees from across the countries with different use case scenarios and experiences that they have gone through. You can just kindly register if you're interested, register to it and save this particular link. Okay, and then thank you everyone for this, uh, for your time, and I hope we could give you a glimpse about what could be one of the approach. Let me just go ahead and see if we have got any questions or yes, we have got some questions and I'll just run through them. So team, if you have got any questions or queries, please post them into the questions panel. Okay. Okay. There is a question from Mr. Sashi Kumar. May I know the source of the data that claims 85 companies have been affected through ransomware? Yes, Sashi, we can share that to you. So once this particular webinar is concluded and this PPT reaches to you, in the bottom of that particular slide where it was claimed, there will be a link. You can just go to that particular link and you will get the entire details of this particular report that was um, studied or published. Okay, so we will be sending out these PPTs. Maybe within some days it will be reaching out to you. My marketing team will be working post this webinar. They will be working and then they will be sending it out to you. Uh, okay, there is another question. Is ransomware an additional module or part of the backup and replication? The ransomware protection is a part of Veeam backup and replication itself. As I said, we do not bind you to go ahead with any hardware. Just if the prerequisites of a particular backup storage are met to set up the hardened Linux repositories, you're free to go ahead and utilize it. Plus, there is no additional add-on licenses also that you need to procure from Veeam. It is all inbuilt with your primary license itself. Okay. Um, so, in any questions or queries, team, please post them into this particular questions panel itself. Parallelly, let me uh, thank you, team. Thank you for the appreciation. I do not see any questions in the chat. Okay, so I'll wait for a minute more and see if there are any additional questions or queries that we have from the team. I know it is Friday and that was a lot of topics that we had to cover in a single session. But then I thought that yes, these were all important topics, so I just collated them as a part of this particular webinar and then delivered it. I hope you have a really good weekend ahead and have a safe day ahead. Thank you so much, team. Thank you.